This is Garis Masculist MGTOW flyers, that is 2-3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 776, entitled Post-Jobs, Gender Politics? Description. When AI robots do all the work and everyone gets a UBI, that's Universal Basic Income, gender politics will be revolutionized. This flyer talks about what aspects of masculinist gender politics will remain after this revolution. The flyer itself. Post-Jobs, Gender Politics? By Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. This flyer asks the question, what will happen to gender politics, feminism and masculism, in an era in which AI robots do all the work, when the concept of employment dies out? What impact will all that have on the usual gender political issues? I think many gender political issues will be made irrelevant. So which, if any, will remain? This flyer talks about that. I broached this question in recent flyers numbered 730, 731 and 752, entitled respectively 730, Masculism and AI. When robots do all the work, people will have babies. 731. Masculism and AI. When robots do all the work, family structures will diversify. And 752. Will AI kill off feminism and masculism? I'll give an overview of the contents of these three flyers and then ask what will remain of gender politics, especially for masculism, once AI robots do all the work. AI is making rapid strides at the time of writing, August 2026. Each week, there are announcements of AI breakthroughs that promise to profoundly shake up society. At the time of writing, LLMs, that's large language models, that is massive neural networks that are trained using massive databases, for example, the whole content of the internet, are being applied to robots, giving them the ability to learn quickly how to perform household and industrial tasks. Elon Musk has predicted that there'll be 10 billion, with a B, robots in the world by 2040. Utterly transforming our culture and our gender politics. This flyer asks what will remain of gender politics after the dust caused by the AI robot revolution settles. Imagine a world that will soon be with us in which robots work at double human speed, 24/7, never having sick leave, no unions, working more efficiently and intelligently than humans, so that there are no more jobs for human beings to perform. Governments will be forced to provide UBI, Universal Basic Income, to its citizens. Otherwise, if citizens are left to starve, the AI leaders and politicians will be butchered in a violent revolution by the unemployed. In a jobless society, human beings will be forced to refocus their lives. Most people don't really enjoy their jobs. They do them because they feel they must, to earn money to pay for food and rent for themselves and their kids. Only a minority take real pleasure in their work, getting real satisfaction and a sense of fulfillment from what they are paid to do. So when robots do all the work and people have UBIs, how will society be structured? And how will this restructuring affect gender politics? How will masculinist ideas survive, if at all? There are cultures for which work for only a few hours a day. They tend to be in tropical areas where their gardens are incredibly prolific, which require only a few hours' work per day. So what do such cultures do to pass the time? Question mark. They have religious rituals, make-up rituals, games, competitions, etc. They do not have a sense of pointlessness at all, because they've had plenty of time to evolve social pastimes that are satisfying to their populations. So, from a cultural anthropological point of view, I have no long-term worries about how humanity will adapt in a jobless era. We know that societies exist which have already successfully solved this problem, so we can learn from them and adapt. But in a UBI world, a robots do all the work world, what happens to masculism? I spend my Friday evenings routinely writing Masculist flyers, then video myself reading them out loud and upload them for the world to see, hoping to influence the world into thinking along Masculist lines. So if most of masculism becomes largely irrelevant due to circumstances changing, so that the ways that women oppress men become irrelevant, then I will need to change my priorities. So I have a personal stake in this question. That is, what happens to masculism when robots do all the work? I think the robot revolution will have a deep impact on masculism and feminism, that is, on gender politics. For example, take the big three of the Masculists, that is, the worst three ways that women oppress men, that are so critical to Masculist theorists like myself. What impact will a robot world have on these big three? I think the big three will be swept into the dustbins of history for the following reasons. The big three are women's manslavery, women's divorce rape, and women's forced fathering. Imagine now a robot world, a UBI world, and ask what impact this world will have on each of the big three. I will address these three in turn. If everyone has a UBI, then no woman is a manslaver, since she will have her own money and will not need to parasite off a man's money. So the prime masculinist concept of manslavery by fluffies, that is, traditional women who expect to live off the money and labour of a man for decades of a man's life, thus manslaving him for decades, close brackets, becomes irrelevant. Men will not be manslaved by women if there are no manslaving women. Such women will be transformed by the UBIs given out by the government. Similarly, the masculinist concept of divorce rape also goes out the window, since today's fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts, who see women as fluffies and men as cash machines to pay for women to have babies, will no longer be valid. Divorcing men will not be obliged to pay divorcing mothers to pay for their kids, whose custody is given to the mothers after the divorce, since these mothers will have their own UBIs. There will remain the issue of custody of the kids, however. Many countries now have joint custody of kids after a divorce, which is automatic. So the Masculists will still have that issue to fight for in those countries and states that still have traditional gender roles, giving mothers custody of the kids in 90% of divorces. What about forced fathering, the third of the big three? If a woman gets pregnant and wants to take the pregnancy to term, and the father doesn't, then there will be no need to put financial pressure on the father to help pay for a kid he doesn't want, because the mother has her own UBI. She can afford to raise the kid herself without financial support of the father, which will liberate him from decades of manslavery, paying for a kid he doesn't want. You may argue that the mother may not get enough UBI to afford to raise a kid on her own without the financial support of the father. Whether this objection remains valid will depend on the productivity level of the robots. So it might be useful at this point to get a gut-level estimate of the level of productivity of the robots in the coming decades. Firstly, they'll be working 24/7. That is, That is about 3 times longer per day than humans, who work an 8-hour day. They will work weekends too, so say 5 times more work per week. They will work much faster than humans, say 10 times faster. They will work more efficiently than humans, say twice as efficiently as humans. So those 3 factors alone give the robots 100-fold greater productivity than humans. So a single mother will be given a UBI that will be based on this much higher productivity that the robots can provide. We will be living in an age of superabundance, provided by the much greater productivity level of robot manufacture and service provision. In our current era, the birth rate is crashing, as 2/3 of young men in the US and South Korea refuse to even date young women, due to these young women being seen by young men as undateable, due to being too poisoned by feminism. Soon, politicians will be forced to ask young men why they refuse to even date young women. The major reason for the crash in the birth rate is the above dating boycott by young men. But if young women have UBIs that make them affluent, as robot productivity will allow, then they can easily afford to have as many kids as they want and be able to afford them easily. With robots doing all the work, there will be revolutions in both family size, family structure, and family location. Most women want to have kids if they can afford to have them easily. So the robots will save humanity from wiping itself out, since today's argument that it's too expensive for a woman to quit her job, thus halving the family income to raise a kid, when it costs $300,000 to do that, will no longer be valid. Robot productivity will be so high that a single mother can afford easily to raise a string of kids, thus turning around the crash in the birth rate. When robots do all the work, family structures can change. For example, they can become multi-generational, the way they were in agricultural times, when most people earned a living on farms. Where people live will become irrelevant, so the countryside will become a lot more populated, since today's need to live in cities for employment reasons will become irrelevant. So people will be able to live in communes in the countryside, etc. All kinds of communities will spring up based on all types of different philosophies or interests, for example, different religious groups, hobby groups, sports groups, etc. A mother with lots of kids will have many other helpers to assist her in raising her many kids. The adage, quote, "It takes a village to raise a child," end quote, will become true again, since the nuclear family will probably become a minority structure due to its many and severe disadvantages when it comes to raising kids. This is the end of part 1.